Okay, let's talk about something we all probably experience. That moment the payment screen flips around asking for like 25% just for handing you something over the counter. Today, we're doing a deep dive into American tipping, how it went from, maybe a thank you to basically funding payroll for employers.
And it really hinges on one key number. It's the federal subminimum wage for tipped workers, $2.13 an hour.
213. That hasn't changed since 1991, right?
That's right, since 1991. And it's the legal mechanism, essentially, that lets businesses shift that wage cost from them onto you, the consumer, through tips.
Wow. So that $2.13 isn't just some old number. It's like fundamental.
Yeah.
But where did this whole tipping thing even start in the U.S.? I knew the origins were not great, but the details are actually kind of stunning.
Yeah, it's quite a history. Tipping really took hold, became widespread right after the Civil War.
Yeah.
During Reconstruction, companies, and the Pullman Company is the big example here, they employed thousands of newly freed black workers, mostly as porters. And they used tipping as, well, basically an excuse not to pay them standard wages.
So wait, the tip wasn't a bonus, it was the wage.
Effectively, yes. It became the wage itself almost immediately. Some sources back then even called it an extension of slavery. It was a way to get labor without the cost.
That's embedding wage suppression right from the start, structurally.
Absolutely. And you still see the echoes today. The economic impact is clear. Data shows over 27% of black workers in the restaurant industry currently live in poverty. It's a direct line, really.
If it was so obviously flawed and frankly discriminatory from the beginning, why didn't early reformers manage to just ban it? I know people tried.
Oh, they definitely tried. There were significant anti-tipping movements early 20th century. Washington State, for instance, actually passed a law in 1909 trying to ban tips completely.
But it didn't stick.
No. Those state-level efforts ultimately failed because when the first federal minimum wage law came along in the 1930s, it specifically included an exception for tipped workers. It basically codified the $2.13 system we're still grappling with.
Which leads us to the current regulatory mess. You've got the federal $2.13 approach, but then states like California have this one fair wage model. What's the actual difference for us paying the bill?
It's a huge difference. The federal system uses what's called a tip credit. The employer pays that $2.13 cash wage, and your tips are credited to make up the difference to the full federal minimum wage. If tips fall short, the employer should make it up, but enforcement is tricky.
Right.
But in one-for-wage states like California, it's simpler. Employers must pay the full state minimum wage. California's is, $16.50 an hour now, before any tips are even considered. Tips are truly extra there.
We've talked money, but the sources we looked at really hammered home a darker side effect of this unstable pay tied to the $2.13 model, the link to sexual harassment.
Yes, that connection is disturbingly strong. When your income depends entirely on pleasing the customer, the power dynamic gets seriously skewed.
Because you need that tip. Exactly.
Reliance on tips is consistently cited as the single biggest factor contributing to workplace harassment in the service industry. About 76% of women working under the subminimum wage report experiencing higher rates of it. They feel forced to endure bad behavior to, make rent.
And meanwhile, for the consumer, the whole system feels like it's breaking down with tipflation. The screens popping up everywhere, coffee shops, takeout counters.
Digital payment systems definitely accelerated that. Something like 72% of people say they feel pressured to tip in way more situations now compared to just 5 years ago.
Feels constant?
It does. And it creates this weird paradox in the data. You'd think tips would be higher where wages are guaranteed, right? But it's the opposite.
How so?
Tipping seems driven more by culture and perceived need. States that still use the low minimum wage, like Delaware, actually have the highest average tip percentages, around 22.5%.
Really?
Yeah. And states with one fair wage, like California, where workers get the full minimum wage before tips, they have the lowest averages, closer to 17.9%. It suggests customers tip more when they feel the worker really needs it for their basic wage.
Okay, hold on. If everyone's annoyed by tipflation and we know the system's history is problematic, why didn't those no-tipping experiments work? Where restaurants raised prices to pay a full wage up front.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it points to the real challenge for reform. The main policy recommendation is still clear. Phase out the federal $2.13 wage legislatively.
But people didn't like the restaurants that tried it.
They didn't stick, generally. It seems we as consumers say we hate tipping pressure, but we react badly to higher menu prices, even if the final bill would be similar. We seem to prefer the illusion of a lower initial price, even if it hides the true labor cost.
So we complain about the prompts, but reject the transparency that could lead to more stable, ethical pay.
It appears so. That's the final, maybe psychological hurdle. Why are we so resistant to price transparency when it comes to fairly compensating the people providing the service we use every single day? It really makes you wonder.